So far, we have talked about various ways of transforming business processes, putting together processes, and creating one long process for customers by removing inertia in the activities that it takes for those process. So today I'm going to share with you examples of process redesign and transformation. So when we think about digital transformation, we often relate to examples that we are familiar with, and they are business to consumer examples. But there's a lot of transformation that's happening between businesses, and they are called business to business digital transformation. So I'll run through some of the examples in both categories. And when we get to business to consumer, I'll break them down into 4 different areas that you can then relate to and categorize how these transformations take place. So in business to business, a company called Encana Oil and Natural Gas was able to transform their process by synchronizing what was happening in the gas wells and what was happening in Wall Street, so that they can monitor the future market and be able to produce, in the end, synchronizing demand with supply. In another example, UPS was able to use analytics, so a different type of digital transformation, by using analytics to figure out what their customers, which was retailers, Macy's and JCPenney's of the world, were doing when they were importing apparel from the Far East. And it turns out that a lot of them were repackaging, labeling for delivery into their individual retail stores. By using that information, they redesigned the process and started to relabel and repackage them while they were in transit on the ship, and therefore reducing the need for bringing it to a warehouse and then taking it back from the warehouse to the retail stores. And finally, an example from healthcare. With the opioid crisis in the US that we have been dealing with, the prescription drug monitoring program is a program between states and pharmacies, where anytime there's an opioid prescription from a doctor or a hospital, the pharmacy checks back with the state's database to make sure that this patient does not have other prescriptions from other physicians, so that they're not overusing it. So these are some examples of how traditional processes were transformed with the use of digital technologies. So let's talk a little bit about business to consumer, the one that we are most familiar with. So when we think about business to consumer process transformation, we think about them in 4 categories. So they are ranging anywhere from efficiency, where a process is transformed by being more efficient, to changing the nature of business. And somewhere in between are also transformation processes that personalize to a customer or radically transform the process itself by inserting technology in it. So when we think about efficiency, these are some common digital transformed applications that we are familiar with. Venmo, for instance, that helps us divide up the restaurant bill when we go out and eat together. Otherwise, it takes longer and people don't have change. So it's just automating and becoming more efficient by transforming the process of settling the restaurant bill. There's an app called Peerby, as in nearby, that allows you to see what your neighbors have in terms of resources, garden tools, or electric drill that you might need. And that way you don't have to go out and buy one that you just needed for a few hours. And then others can borrow equipment from you. Again, making the process of knocking on somebody's door to find out whether they have that equipment more efficient. Home Depot allows you to find installers of equipment that you buy from them. So water softener, for instance. Once you buy a water softener, you need to install it. Well, they'll help you find somebody who can come and install it and maybe even give you a quote for how much it will cost. On the personalization side, Five Brothers Lawn Care in Williamsburg, Virginia, is a small company that takes care of the lawn treatments 4 or 5 times a year. They use Google Maps to give you an online, on-the-spot quote by being able to assess the area that needs lawn care. In another example, a GE has automated its dishwashers and other equipment where they can remotely diagnose what the problem is and fix it sometimes if it's software related. And if it's a part that needs to be replaced, they can diagnose that, order the part so that the part and the technician arrives at the same time, and they can immediately change the part that needs to be replaced. In the process design example, there's a company called Podium that allows you to, if you're a car repair shop, for instance, allows you to automate the process of giving customer a quote of what's wrong with the car, what needs to be replaced, and get out of the process that awkward conversation that you have when you are called into the manager's office who has to run down and tell you what's wrong with your car. They provide that online and they tell you what's wrong, how urgent is it, can you wait for this? And then you pick the services, and like a shopping cart, it tells you this is the total cost, and you can pay it online immediately. That has transformed the process of repair services, for instance. Tailor is this app that allows you to custom design your clothes and order them by using digital technology that takes measurements and tailor clothes that are specifically designed for you. And then there are apps that change the nature of business. And a lot of them come from government and not-for-profit organizations. So for example, at William and Mary, we have transformed the process of delivering education through online. Now, we were already doing that prior to the pandemic, but parts of the process were automated and digitized, others were not. And we were able to ramp them up in a way that we could offer classes that were asynchronous online, in fact, entire program, classes that were partly online, so flipping the classroom, where we were using the online discussion in the classroom and delivering the recorded materials to students, to having classes that were fully synchronous in real time, but online. That way the students could choose whatever works for them during this pandemic. And there's no telling how it will change the nature of business and how we will deliver education, not just at William and Mary, but the university system altogether. And some of the other examples that come from third world countries where a large population does not have access to financial services. So for instance, M-Pesa in Kenya was able to automate processes in a way that it would provide banking services to people who did not have bank accounts, where they can transfer money to each other. Initially, it started with transferring minutes on the use of the phone, mobile phone, and then those minutes became currencies. In Bangladesh, for instance, bKash, a platform, allows people to conduct banking services, and they've expanded that now where they can have access to education, learning how to speak English, be able to pay their bills, be able to access other government services. A state, Tamil Nadu in India, has provided a lot of these services online, governmental services online, where people can do their income taxes, access educational services, medical services, agricultural information for farmers, all online. In the US, we are seeing during this COVID, the vaccination program is one that is automated, and people were scheduling vaccinations and keeping track of their vaccination records. Time will tell how this process that was put together very quickly during COVID is then going to be able to use for other purposes, voting, for instance, and other public services. Next week, when we get together in our last and 10th episode, I will share with you a framework on how we can populate these services and these organizations that we've talked about, both on B2B and B2C, in a 2x2 setting that helps us understand and perhaps provide a roadmap for you to identify opportunities for digital transformation.